Hello, everyone. We are live. Thank you for joining us today on the Show Must Go On line. Today's guest is Joelle Leon. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. The ice cream truck is outside in the background, tempting me. My daughter is not crying loudly yet, so things are on the up and up right now.
It is the little things in life that we need to take advantage of, enjoy.
Yeah, gotta embrace. Gotta embrace them. How are you? How are you?
You know what? I'm doing pretty well today, actually. There are those days where you wake up and you're like, my back hurts. The world is just like not nice to people. There's just like no equality, and I want, and that's tough. And I'm trying to like accept that and see how I can change it, and also wake up with a more positive attitude so that we can help make change and also like keep spirits up.
That's super important. I try to stress to people, outside of having some chemical disorder or imbalance in like real serious mental health condition that doesn't allow you the opportunity to really show up in spaces as your fullest self. It really is under our control and discretion how we get to show up for the trauma that I think, especially now, I think it's a lot easier to look at what's happening in the outside world and ask, like, how can I heal? How can I be of service when there's so much, when there's so much darkness and like community, I think, but part of our job, again, if we can show up for it and authentically, is to really choose to find ways, to your point, to not even just be positive, but where are the spaces for opportunity, for growth, for and for doing the work and showing up for ourselves and for our communities,
Right. And I feel like that's where you are such a gift to all of us. It's true, because you find these words, and being able to write them, to tell them as a storyteller, it's been so powerful to both hear it when I watch your YouTube videos and when I see your tweets and Instagram posts, because I feel like I can also hear it in your voice, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, and which is great. I think that's kind of been the goal, I think, for me to establish that kind of connection, like with the people I care about, and not for nothing, I do. I care about everybody. I love everybody for the most part,
Right.
So I think for me, it's always been really important to seek and find ways to speak to people in the ways that I try to speak to myself. Literally everything that I'm saying, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be repurposed content from Twitter on Instagram, or via interviews, wherever I have an opportunity in the space to kind of show up and share my learnings, right? It's really coming from a space of, this is what I've processed, this is what I've been through, and hoping. Gotta love New York. Perfect backdrop. But hoping that by me processing and sitting with those things that I have learned, that my shared experience can in some way, shape, or form help others, process as well. It's important for me anyway.
Yeah, it is. And I can see Judy's over here commenting, hello, authentically showing up. Love that. Yes, people feel it. People are encouraged. And if you're watching this, please feel free to comment below and we can see it, and we will ask any questions that you might have. And it's all about the community, right? Whether you're like asking questions or commenting here, seeing it in person. I know seeing your Rockwood music hall performances. Sorry, if y'all see a little movement going on, that's because my adorable dog Slim, it wants to be a part of this.
There goes Slim. What is your other dog's name?
Oh, that's look at that. Hi. Funny you should ask that. So Slim's sister's name is Shady. What?
What a coincidence.
Shady.
What a coinky dink.
So funny.
It's so odd that they are both named. When you put their names together, it's actually a rapper's name. That is wild.
No, hi.
Yeah.
It's funny because when you are doing a live video by yourself, you have this being that wants all of your attention because she's just the cutest. It makes it very, very difficult sometimes. And I apologize to you.
You should, because this is disappointing. I did not sign up for this. No, this is great. This is organic. This is like how it's supposed to be. Like, there's going to be my nephew walking by here carrying a baby. It's like, it's real life. We're in the house.
True.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's like these quarantine videos. If you're not expecting something to happen, then like, why are we even doing it?
Yeah, what's the point? Like, what's the point?
What is the point? So cute. Actually, to that point, I was going to talk about Rockwood, and we will in a moment. But I want to talk about how, like, for me, having this dog has just been like this light in quarantine, has been this like feeling of brevity and responsibility that's really nice. Like, I have to take him outside. I have to take him on walks. I have to make sure to feed him and love him, and he loves me, and that's been really nice. And whether you have a dog or a child or a family member, there's so many aspects of just taking care of someone. Have you found like that's been true for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a tweet I put out recently that went viral, and it was based off of a conversation, really an IG conversation I had with a friend of mine, Adria Moses, and she was trying to name a plant. She was trying to name her plants, and she was asking for names, and I was like, just name it Adria, like name it yourself. And then it was like, oh, but that's like a life hack. If you because really what it is like if you name a plant after yourself, generally you're supposed to be speaking words of affirmation to your plants. And for a lot of people, affirmations either tend to be corny or hard to do when it comes to themselves, but they can do it for other people. So like there was this tweet I essentially sent out that was like, it's a life hack. Name yourself after your plant. I bring that up only because to your question of, granted, I don't, Bria, my partner, she had a lot of plants, but she was killing all of them. So she gave a lot of them away. But not to throw under the bus like that. But I think, but like plants,
it happens.
Yeah, it happens, right? It happens. It's normal. Plants, pets, children, but even honestly, even this community, I've been very adamant about recognizing how important social media and like followers, because I don't really do followers per se. It's like this is a community, and part of my work, especially when we talk about what's been happening very recently with Black Lives Matter. And for me, it's been kind of pivoting a lot of them, not a lot, but like pivoting the language I've been using to ensure it's not just speaking to the pandemic moment, but also to the moment that we're in presently, and how we can show up in spirit and heal ourselves while in the process of trying to dismantle and decolonize the police state and leaning more or less towards like an abolitionist, anti-racist point of view moving forward. But a lot of that for me is I found nurturing actually in having to show up not just for my partner and my children and even for myself, but also for the larger community, because I'm recognizing there's a strength in that, where we all can kind of lean on and lean in to each other, to kind of find the energy to continue to move and push forward. So for me, it's been very interesting to have to juggle the energy of the trauma and like the grief that has been existing, whether we're talking about the loss of lives of a Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery, or like the loss of jobs and lives due to COVID, like balancing and holding space for that while also reconciling that with the opportunities that I think you're also alluding to for like finding that level of not just camaraderie but like love in how we get to show up for people and for ourselves, like even in the midst of everything we're going through now, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And we can't talk about just COVID anymore because the
Yeah,
Black Lives Matter movement is here. It's been here and it's picking up steam. And maybe it's because people are just saying this is enough, and maybe
mhm,
it's also because quarantine has given that time and space for people who are
yeah,
at home now and
mhm,
aren't at work.
yeah,
But whatever the cause is, whatever is the thing that sparked it into a flame,
yeah,
it's here. And if you
yeah,
can't ignore it, and you shouldn't ignore it, and we need to be held more accountable for our actions, we
mhm,
need
for
to
sure.
give more platforms to Black
Yeah,
actors,
yeah,
artists, performers,
yeah,
speakers, people on the stage, behind the scenes,
yeah, yes,
everything.
yeah. And I love that because I think something that I've been I think it's just as it's important for us to want more representation in front of the camera. I often that's the least of my worries, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of it for me is simple stuff like who are the camera grips, who, and then like when we talk about the bigger stuff, right? Like who are the stage managers, who are the casting directors, who are the producers,
Yeah.
right? Like who's who are the people in the writing rooms, who's
Mm-hmm.
making those decisions. And I think that's more important because that's when we're really talking about power. I think front of the camera activity or even on the stage activity, that's those are table stakes at this point. I think what we're really talking about is real representation that allows for more decision making to be happening amongst the community so that we get to make choices and decisions about what gets seen and also how it gets seen.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also for me been very mindful because I've had a lot of those conversations about having more women
Mm,
directors, more
yeah,
women behind the scenes. Like I worked in television for years and I was sometimes the only person as a camera operator. And when I
yeah,
worked at Comcast Sportsnet, like there were actually a good amount of women and Black people. And I felt like maybe this was a normal
mm,
thing that you don't see in most
yeah,
places. So maybe my brain kind of was like, you know what, like it's not perfect by any means, but also
yeah,
this is like some good representation. Then I worked in Texas and it was like,
mm,
okay, this is
yeah,
need to you need to get to work. And so maybe taking it from a place of like, well, where have I been maybe disenfranchised? And also
mm,
as Jewish, I can certainly relate to that. And
yeah,
now how can we lift up other people? Because if you don't lift other people up, who's going to be there for you?
yeah. And I think that brings up a larger conversation about access. When I look at a state like a Texas or other states that tend to lean more or less conservative Republican,
Right.
it's not like there's a lack of a marginalized community or a lack of like by POC Black community in these areas and in these spaces. But I think access becomes a larger part of that conversation about who knows about the opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
who's given access to those opportunities, right? Because a lot of it, really, regardless of where we are, it is about who you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't know the right people, if you don't have access to those circles, you are left out of those conversations. And so I think part of the work, at least part of the work for me, has been how do I use my platform in a way that enables me to create more opportunities for other voices and other people to be seen on these platforms so that, again, we kind of continue the momentum of um, building community and also creating access for all voices, all underrepresented, all marginalized voices in the process.
Beautifully said. You always have those right words.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. And so let's talk about a book about things I will tell my daughter.
Yes. Yeah.
It's I saw the promo video for it that you also put on YouTube, and that was great to kind of get that visual aspect.
Yeah,
and I talk about it. So why don't you share a little bit about why you wanted to write it and the reaction it's been getting?
Well, it was my first book, and I knew it was going to be an easy. I wanted it to be as easy as a lift as possible. There were a lot of essays and poems I had written in the span of like 3 or 4 years that really hadn't seen the light of day. And at that point, my profile had started growing to a certain degree. And so it felt like the time was right to kind of put together a book that I felt like could encapsulate as best as possible at that time my experience as a new father. And really what I wanted to do was create a leave behind for my first daughter, Lila, who's now 4, and something that I think about legacy a lot, and the creation of a legacy and what that means for me. And for me, it's really it boils down to leaving something behind for my daughters that is indicative of not just my worth and value and whatever, but also indicative of the love and the worth and value I've put into them, and having something that speaks to not just my existence, but our existence as human beings and as a community. And so, the book was essentially a collection of some essays that I'd done relatively well on medium.com, and also some poems that I felt like could explain to Lila, if I wasn't around, or if she just wanted to know, what my thinking, what my process looked like before she was born, when the process of her still being in the womb, and then also what life started to look like when she came, when she landed here on Earth. So that was really it for me. It was really just trying to capture that energy and put it into a book. And fortunately, Bottle Cap Press, shout out to Craig. He was interested in the manuscript. I sent him the manuscript, and we signed the contract within a day. And for me, it was a great learning experience. But then also, it's really cool to be able to pick up the book and see my daughter on the cover of it. And I had pretty much all creative control through that process. So it was special for sure. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that and legacy is such a hot word this week with Hamilton coming out on Friday.
Yes, this is very true. And like, shout out to Lynn. I'm excited for him. I'm excited for Shockwave and Chris, and of course, like all the other folks that are maybe like tangibly connected to the show that was in this Hamilton, like David, and like the opportunities that have come from the individuals who got to partake in that, which really, I think, too, there's been a lot of conversations in different sections of the community. Some who felt like it was like a watered down version of like what hip hop is, and I can respect that, but I can also reckon with how important and how impactful the work was, and really, honestly, how good it was. Like when you look at the work that was put into that show, it's unlike anything I think we've seen on Broadway, and I think it's a testament to just like Lynn's skill set and the skill set of the entire cast. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm super I'm excited for the doors that show's open, because even even for me, like I started working on my one man show, and a lot of it was recognizing like there'd been other times where hip hop had shown up in the space, right? Like Saul Williams had put up something that didn't do well really at all, and I think the community wasn't really ready for it, but I also think sometimes you need an event such as a Hamilton to really break open the
Mhm.
doors. You know what I'm saying? Because honestly, if a Hamilton doesn't happen, I don't know how well a slave play does. You know, like now, granted, you
Mhm.
know, slave play is not a musical, but when we look at art and culture, really, and like the culture of hip hop, and granted, Hamilton is not steeped in the culture of blackness, but it's hard to extract blackness from hip hop and the culture. In fact, I don't think you can.
Mhm.
So that Hamilton in and of itself opens, I think, a broader conversation about what does it look like to have representation of the culture, like
Mhm.
live in front of an audience that generally is white, you know? Um, and so like that's so when we talk about legacy, like that's not it creates more room for other types of things that maybe Broadway wouldn't have looked at or given a look to, prior to Hamilton. So it's something that I think is important for us to acknowledge for sure.
Yeah, and that's why representation matters, right? Seeing
Mhm.
the kids who get to go to Hamilton through EduHam, who maybe have never seen a Broadway show before, and
Yeah.
then they think, oh, maybe I could be a lighting designer. Oh, maybe I
Mhm.
could be on Broadway. And seeing how that spawns off also is this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And also to your point, like if there weren't a Hamilton, probably Freestyle Love Supreme wouldn't have made it to Broadway
Oh
because
yeah.
right, like
Yeah.
that resurgence. And then seeing you and Arthur Lewis perform at Rockwood, this is like that full circle moment.
Yeah.
It's amazing how when one thing becomes this huge
Yeah.
phenomena,
Yeah.
then the other things, other parts of
Yeah.
life, then also gets to spark up, and that's been really cool.
And that's and like not for nothing, that's the like, and I mentioned earlier when I talk about like the platform, to me that's what really I've been trying to do, like arthur Arthur Lewis, outside of being one of my best friends, is also one of the most talented people I know. And so what I love about Freestyle Love Supreme is that he's a part of it, but there's so much that he does that you don't get to see because, right, like that's not really where the show is centered. And so what I enjoy about us coming together is it brings in my background of theater training and performing and really being an MC alongside Arthur's like skillful songwriting and also too like the improv element, because we've been doing this before. Like Arthur's been doing Freestyle Love Supreme for forever, but Arthur and I had been performing together in a band for at least 8 to 9 years before we kind of siphoned off and did our 1-2 duo thing. And what I will say is like really Freestyle Love Supreme more than anything has opened the conversation for us. And granted, this is pre-COVID, but us looking at what would it look like to bring this to a Broadway, or what would it look like to kind of um, create more of a storytelling element to it. Like, and it might have been at the last show that you were in, that you attended actually, where we, for whatever reason, I think because we did less songs, we had more time to talk and engage with the audience, which is really kind of a precursor for what we were trying to look at doing, to tell more stories about the songs and also, really lean into the freestyle improv element of what it is we do a lot of the time. But to your original point, like what I appreciate about what Lynn does, and like what I encourage all creatives to always do, and it's something like when you look at what Judd Apatow does, right? It's essentially it's almost always the same cast of characters. For me, it's I want to make sure I'm diversifying the pool in that way. So one, like as my platform continues to grow, how are the other ways that I can ensure that I'm including diverse voices on stage and in the conversation in hopes that they then get to do the same for other people. Um, but like that's how it's supposed to work, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that last show was amazing, and I'm grateful that I've gotten to see two of them because it's cool to be able to compare them, and the energy in the room for both was electric. And you can tell that it's cool at a space like Rockwood because everyone's like really close, like you are almost as close as this camera is to my face.
Basically.
And that's like the difference between anything that's like filmed versus live, right? Like I think that whole conversation right now of well, you know, will things go back to the way they are? Well, I hope that they improve and that there's a lot more diverse voices, but you can never take away that live element, because even though things that are filmed we get to enjoy right now, and that's thing, there will never be that same thing that you can get from looking up and looking around you and feeling that magic in the air.
People have been asking, like, people ask like, yo, where can I get this song? Or, you know, when are you and Arthur going to record an album? And we're both pretty clear about that not happening unless we record maybe a live album. But, you know, I've had people say, like, you know, we need to capture more video, which I do agree with, so that folks can kind of get an idea or a sense of what it looks like. But video doesn't really do justice to what Arthur and I do. Like, I'm very much aware of that. Like, there's an energy in the space that happens that we bring because of who we are and how we're connected to each other, that facilitates like the thing that I feel like happens, which feels very spiritual in that way, you know? And like, we were excited, like, and there's that very, like, this is very fine line between growing, right? Us getting a bigger audience. Like, we've been selling out the shows, and so we moved to a bigger space, and it still felt intimate. And I think what for us moving forward, you know, when we looked at maybe potentially even a bigger venue, it's like, how do you keep that intimacy? Because that's really, I think, for me, the most important part. The most important and most exciting part of what we do is that how intimate it is, so that we can make eye contact. I can hear when people comment. I can feel when there's been a shift, you know, in the room. And you can't really, it's hard to do that with 500 people, with 300 people, you know, but 170, 200, you can still get that. But it was wild to see how many people were there the last show. But that's, for us, it goes back to how do we keep that live element, because there is nothing like it. You know, like, you can't record that and then play it, and you can see the talent, but it's not about the skill set. It's about the energy involved in the people in the space that get to share it, you know?
And I love what you always talk about with that religious aspect, because whatever your religion may be, there is that thing that unites us in that feeling, right? That feeling of unity, and there's something bigger than ourselves. And I feel that when I'm at your shows. I feel that energy. And it's funny too, because my whole job is filming and capturing the moment. And I feel like, you know, I've been watching that performance a lot recently, because I like to go back through work that the guest has done. I've been watching your TED Talk, and it's amazing to be able to have that as a thing that lives on forever, right? I love that aspect. And yet, in a heartbeat, I would go back live. Right? There's still that aspect that I love with videos, that you can capture a moment, but you can't capture the essence.
And you know, for me, it's hard. Like, this is why I rarely watch recorded. Like, I used to a lot more when I was auditioning, however long that was. And for me now, it's I kind of, not even one and done, because it's not like I've grown so much that I don't need to watch videos of my performances, but it's more about, that was a moment that I have up here, and I can, like, recall how it doesn't sully it per se, but there's something about, again, to your point, like, being in the element of the work when it's happening. And sometimes I will go back to watch things just because it reminds me of how I felt in that moment, which is way more important to me than the actual technical approach to the work. You know, it's like, how did that feel? And then making sure I don't try to recreate that, because you can't, which is why I love improv so much. Because part of the work especially as an MC who's freestyling on stage, it's really about seeing seeing where the energy is and playing with the crowd. Sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's like, where am I? Like, where is my heart right now? And what do I want to kind of rap about, while making it up on stage. It's a very interesting practice, but it's always different. But that's why I appreciate the live element so much, because you never really know what's going to happen. Because at one point in time, Arthur and I, not really Arthur and I, it was me. It was me really being concerned, because there's about a good 10 songs that we do, but they're always different. Like if Arthur's asking me to come freestyle, then it changes the song. And then also I've been recognized, but there's not many people who have seen every single incarnation of the show. And so it's okay to keep it as is, because it doesn't really get stale, because we're always doing something different, at least trying to,
Yeah, and we could feel it. Gigi, who's commenting here, we were talking about how excited I was to chat with you, because it's amazing how the Twitterverse has kind of united people that you never, I never imagined that social media would connect it like that. Gigi saying the difference in response that people had for Slave Play versus Hamilton was wild, as someone who's seen both, just going back to that earlier point, and it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes this is a big time people have been saying about feeling uncomfortable and being okay with being uncomfortable. And also having seen both, the reaction is certainly different.
Yeah. And, no, go on, sorry. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, I think the fact that they had a Black performance, Black audience performance for Slave Play was amazing. And covering the opening night for Slave Play was an amazing experience to see how the work on stage was so difficult and powerful, and I could only imagine what the actors were going through. And then the celebration at the opening night party and the lavishness of it, showing that you're doing this hard thing on stage, and we want to celebrate you for being able to be so vulnerable. And also you did such a fabulous job. I remember Jeremy O'Hara said that he had actually gotten people stylists and had done it as a gift for his artists, so that they could feel that appreciation.
Yeah, and shout out to Gigi, because she's always so supportive on social. There were a lot of folks who, and especially in the Black community, who were very anti-slave play without even seeing it, just because, again, it's we don't need another slave anything, which I completely get. I think part of what I've been trying to do, part of my work really has also been creating more space for dialogue around things, because not everything that has the title of such means it's going to lean into the things that we've been very much fearful of or against, right? Like a slave play it's not a slave play. And even when you read the description of it, for some folks, I think part of the practice for me, it goes into not judging the thing before I engage with the thing. Now, granted, it's a lot harder for a lot of other people to do that, especially in the community, because there's so much trauma attached to art and to slavery, and rightfully so. But part of my job and part of my creative practice is really trying to help people unpack that trauma, so that we get to show up in spaces as our fullest self, and also engage with things that might be uncomfortable, but they don't have to be triggering. But yeah, the response was very interesting. I also think they're doing two very different things, right? Slave Play wouldn't be on Disney. You know what I'm saying? It's what they're doing two very different things. And some would argue that Slave Play was created for the white gaze, which I think Jeremy was creating a piece of art he was creating a piece of art. And I think that in and of itself, especially from a Black man who identifies as queer, something that it's more important to embrace and recognize it for what it is before kind of jumping to conclusions about what the work could be or is or isn't.
That's such a fair point. And I've really enjoyed that in your writing. You say, you know, I write for the Black audience. And I think I take that as I'm a guest in this space. I'm here to observe, and that's great. I think we need more of that. And have you noticed that, especially in this time, with so many people specifically talking about the Black experience and trying to lift up Black voices, that you take on this larger role, and that's a great thing, but also maybe that can be a little overwhelming?
Well, you know, it doesn't. I think, you know, I've been prepared for this. You know, I could have never predicted a COVID. I could have never predicted the very unfortunate murders of Breonna and George and Ahmaud. But I do think, for me, I know very much that my spirit was groomed for showing up in this moment in the way that I am now, for starters. And then also, I think, you know, well, for me, I don't put a lot of pressure on myself to be whomever the community needs me to be. I just show up as I am. And, you know, a lot of the learnings I have when it comes to the process of writing, I pulled from Toni Morrison, who for me by far is the greatest American writer we've ever had. But like her being very explicit about not writing for the white gaze. And I think you said it perfectly. You know, and granted, let me just preface this by saying I'm not comparing being Black or being part of the Black community as a person who might be living with a disability. But what the analogy I've been using is like when buildings are like newly built buildings have to have wheelchair ramps, right? Like you have stairs, you have wheelchair ramps. I can use a wheelchair ramp if I want to. There's nothing barring me from it, but it wasn't created for me, you know? And I think of the writing very much similarly in that vein, where it's the writing was made for specific people. I embrace and encourage everyone of all races and ethnicities and backgrounds to read the work, to share the work, to challenge the work even, and have conversations about the work, but also being very cognizant of the fact that the work was not created with the intent of servicing all these other people. It is for Black people for a very specific reason, and that is because there are not enough clear-cut spaces just for Blackness to show up in its truth. And so, for me, to be fair, I've always been doing that, but it's been very recently that I've proclaimed it as a thing. Like, you know, I didn't put it in my bio until maybe the beginning of last year. And so I've really been leaning into that as an artist and as a storyteller, because I like setting the tone for the energy in spaces, right? So I think I said that when before Arthur and I started our Rockwood performance. You know, it's like, this is why I'm doing my art. And I see what that does to the Black faces in the room. You know, it's like, it's very much an alert for them to let them know, like, this is going to be a safe space for us to be in our truth. And what I love about our show, and like, you know, Arthur and I have talked about this, you know, when you go to a Freestyle Love Supreme show, and again, this goes back to access, right? And privilege to a certain extent. Because not to say that the team isn't trying, but Broadway still feels very much like an exclusive club for whiteness. And, you know, what I love about our shows is like, oh, you can show up, right? And then there's like my good friend Trey Dejan, who's like a 6'2" Black man, shows up, and there's so many colors and so many backgrounds and experiences that share space in the room, because Arthur and I come from two different backgrounds, you know. Whereas, you know, I was groomed in hip hop circles, like in ciphers and in battles, and like that's so like I bring that element, you know, into spaces, and it's beautiful to see like all these different energies kind of coalescing together, which I'm grateful for, which wouldn't happen if I didn't have an Arthur like right next to me, beside me, bringing what he does to the space, and me bringing what I bring into the space. But for sure, like when I'm creating art, I don't have to think about it being black because I am. So for me, it's more about explicitly calling it out for those who are going to be engaging with the art, so they know the intent and the purpose behind it.
Yeah. And it feels so authentic that way because it's your life, it's your story.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people who preface something they don't come from that culture, they like overdo it because it's like, I'm trying to show like I'm an ally, which is great. I'm trying to show I'm an ally, but a lot of that is attempting to also take a step back, to research, come prepared, and then where you want to take it.
Yeah. And you know, and I applaud you for it. And part of that too is like discernment, you know, recognizing when is it, when am I supposed to be listening, and when am I supposed to be engaging and being outspoken. And what I've been attempting to do as an empath and as an artist is really ensure that I'm showing up for the difficult conversations for both sides of it, especially if there are individuals who are willing to learn but don't have the language. You know, like I have space for that. Not a lot of people do, nor should people be expected, especially from the Black community, be expected to have and create space for that. I fortunately can. And so I try to remind folks, like, not everyone functions like me. Not everyone shows up like I do. Blackness is very much a monolith. And so the more we can respect and understand those boundaries and know that the way Joel shows up and makes room for people to listen, engage, and feel heard, not everyone has the capacity or space for that. And I'm a Black man, a light-skinned Black man at that, who has some level of privilege as a man and as a person of a lighter tone. And so for me, I see that as a responsibility. And it's not weighty at all for me, but a responsibility for and to the community, to show up in a way that allows for conversation, that facilitates conversation, and can challenge systems with my art and with my voice, you know, if I can.
Yeah, such a great point too, that Black people have been having this struggle every day of their lives. This is not anything new.
Nope.
And
no.
Not the time to necessarily be going to someone and say, what should I do to make it better?
Yeah. It's about discernment. And, you know, I do tell people, you know, telling a person to just Google it, I'm not the biggest fan of per se, because I get why. But, you know, even with SEO terms being biased, right? Because we have to look at how coding is biased, and like who are the companies and who are the data specialists who are behind why we create certain algorithms.
Yeah.
That's something to kind of keep in mind when we look at the information people get when they're just merely doing a Google search. I do think though, we are behooving those who are non-Black individuals to show up to do the work, because even if you're just paying attention, you know, like even if you just go to my feed, you know, if you're in my IG stories, you're going to see content that resonates in the space, and you're going to see people who are sharing resources, and those individuals who are practicing anti-racism, who have PhDs and master's degrees in that space, who have links in their bios, who have books, who, like, if you're paying attention very much in the same way that I've had to, like a lot of the things that I've learned about Black feminism and womanism and how to use appropriate language for the queer community has been via social media, and it's been about me paying attention and listening. Listening to Black women, listening to trans Black women, listening to the conversations, and being mindful and not trying to interject or add my 2 cents or my opinion, but just listening so that I can take that information and grow from it, which I think is going to be really important for us moving forward as a community when we talk about Black Lives Matter as not just a moment in time, but an ever evolving, continuous movement for social justice.
Yes. This is not a moment, it's a movement.
Exactly.
I don't know if you've seen Disclosure on Netflix.
No.
It is. It's about Laverne Cox is one of the leading.
Yeah. I saw the trailer for it. Yeah. Laverne. Yeah.
Learning about the trans community, the trans experience, I felt like I've been a pretty good ally, but there's so much I didn't know, and that was, I felt like, maybe required viewing for a lot of people. Feel like they, like me, want to be the best that we can be, but in doing so, we don't have all that history. We don't know your experience as well. And just what you're saying about the Black feminine experience and all of those aspects of it, I think, especially saying trans lives matter, especially saying all Black lives matter, is so important right now.
Yeah, so important. And you know, I think about the writer George Johnson. He said something on Twitter maybe a year or so ago that's always stuck with me, and it's like, you know, I'm surmising it, but like, we talk about being allies, but a lot of y'all, a lot of us, what he was a very pointed statement he was making, but a lot of us are friends with people who are transphobic or homophobic or are still engaging in transphobic and homophobic behaviors. And you can't really be an ally if you're not reckoning with that and dealing with that and disassociating yourself from that as well, which I thought was really important. And it's been important for me to kind of carry that in the back of my mind, like who and what am I engaging with that is making and creating unsafe spaces for the community, and how can we show up in a way that allows for a more in-depth analysis of how we can be better for the community and protect and lift up and amplify their voices.
Yep. And having those conversations with family members, which can be very tough, and maybe close friends as well, but you have to know that who your circle is also there supporting other people that you support. And if you're not okay with that, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it, but this is like the time to stand. Now is the time to really assess what people are saying and thinking, and understanding where you stand and wanting to be on the right side of history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, what I would say to people too is leading with love in these conversations does not equate to like a pat on the hand or kumbaya moment. Love gets to challenge people, and I really want that to be clear for folks. I think we miss a really important opportunity when we let love kind of sit in this space of timidness. Like, I think there's the idea that if you are having a conversation that lets love in, you're just being docile or passive, really. When I don't think, you know, looking at love through the lens of the Black Panther Party, looking at love through the lens of Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, or, you know, the SNCC program or CORE, like, whether it was nonviolent protests, whether it was the Black Panther Party storming the Capitol with guns or starting the free breakfast program in underserved neighborhoods, all that is really centered around love and challenging systems in a way that's protective of the communities that they're trying to uplift. And so I think we get to go into these conversations with those individuals who maybe are in our family, who are transphobic, who are homophobic. And it doesn't mean it's like, oh, it's okay to be transphobic. It's like, no, I love you, and so I get to call you out and challenge you on this behavior and ask the very hard questions, and also make a decision about whether or not I get to keep you in my life. You know, because loving a person doesn't mean you have to stick around for them or stick around for their potential growth. We don't. I get to love you and keep my distance. I get to love you and remove you from my life. I get to love you and call you out on your bullshit while also moving in a way that doesn't allow me to lose my integrity in the process.
Mm-hmm. Speaking to so many truths right there. Really. So I want to respect the time, and we have a few minutes left. I want to know what you're doing to take care of yourself these days.
I mean, stuff like this, you know, I love talking to people. And so talking out, talking about these theories and ideas that I have in my head out loud is very much like part of my therapeutic practice, I think. You know, spending time with my partner, with my daughter, FaceTiming my daughter Lila, because she's in Houston now. Writing, you know, like social media, like Twitter. What I've been telling people recently, Twitter is kind of like my fake journal. You know, I just saw Judy left a comment. Yeah, I'm so guilty of sitting in timidness. You know, like to Judy and anyone that is listening, or anyone that will be listening afterwards, like this is not the time for us to be timid. I think, you know, us being passive in this moment is really how we got here in the first place, you know. And you know, sometimes we have to process. Sometimes for us it's hard because we're trying to process all of the feelings that we have about the moment, which is just as important as showing up for the moment. And sometimes showing up for the moment at that time for you is rest, or you know. But I think part of it is sometimes we try to figure out the right way to say the thing, or what is the right thing to say. And I think when we're trying to combat racism or transphobia or homophobia or our able-bodied privilege, whatever our privileges might be, there is no room for us to second guess the why of showing up. You know, what I've been telling people is I treat it like New York City treats terrorism. You know, like if you see something, say something. You know, like if you see behavior that looks like a microaggression against another person, if you're seeing something or hearing something from a person that's close to you that's either triggering you, or you can tell is a direct response to that person's innate biases or prejudices, it's our job to call that out. And it's our job and our responsibility to do that for the health of the community. You know, like I don't believe in this, and this is kind of me meandering a little bit, but I don't necessarily believe in like the few bad apples in the bunch. Like especially when we talk about police forces, it's not about a bad apple. There's like the whole tree is fucked up. Like we need to cut the tree down.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't. It's not a. It's that spoils the root. You know, like we have to reimagine what it looks like to plant new seeds and create a new harvest for a new way of thinking and being in this world. But for me, like that's where my healing has come from. It's come from seeing other people really engaging and embracing the work. And then also like what I was getting to, Twitter is really like kind of like my mini journal where I'm not talking about personal things online, because that's not generally what I don't do unless there's something very significant, whether it's like some success or some really impactful moment that's happened between myself and my family. But for me, it's my out loud processing of things that are coming to mind and spirit that I get to share with the community. And so that's been really healing for me, and also walking, because like walking is my form of like therapy in that way. So getting fresh air, seeing people, you know, like seeing people has been very much helpful for me during this time, for sure.
Yeah. Grab your mask, get outside.
Yeah, grab your mask, please. Don't come with no fucking mask. Nah, this ain't the time. This is not the time at all.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I have this beautiful like space out here, a lot of open grass area. But I'm in Washington State right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, nice. I'm at my boyfriend's place with our adorable dog.
So you got a beautiful view. Probably. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful. But like I've seen one or two other humans for like the last few months, like in person, and like obviously having these chats has been amazing and healing. But it's such an odd experience to think about how many people are like back home, like living their lives with your mask and going to the grocery store and whatnot. Because I haven't done that. It's just very.
It is. It is. It feels. Early on, it felt very dystopian. It felt like I was in some like 1984 remake type situation. But it's what I used to say a lot when I first became a co-parent, and like my schedule was super different and everything felt different. But things are abnormal until they become normal. Whatever normal means to us and for us. But we as humans, we adapt. We adapt very well for the most part. Some of us, don't can look at the White House and see very clearly that a lot of people do not know how to adapt or want to. But for me and the other people who actually give a shit about human lives, adapting is a part of the process and a part of our growth. And so challenges force us to kind of look at how we get to show up for different moments, and pull from ourselves in that way. So it's like, now it's I'm comfortable wearing a mask. I don't like it. I miss seeing people's face, but I'd rather do that than like die and kill other people. So, that's where we're at.
The contradiction of like, yeah, it might not be comfortable, but I'd rather be uncomfortable than like die or have you die or like I left because I live with my grandma at home and she's 91 years old. There's no way. Nope.
That's special. And, unfortunately, I think what we're seeing, and I wish, if there was a wish that I did have, it would be that folks would recognize very clearly, A, racism, B, classism, and then also which communities matter to people. There's a segment of the population, like persons such as yourself, those in the Black community, those in POC communities, like indigenous populations, who recognize very clearly community is all encompassing. And there are those who really see a certain kind of community that they're trying to protect that matter to them. When I look at that picture of that couple that have that law firm, and I forget the brother's name who tweeted it, like, we're making memes about this picture, but Tamir Rice was murdered for a gun that looked like a toy, and you have two very prominent people in their community, white people at that, who are waving guns at peaceful protesters. And there's a large segment of the population, I think very large, who are comfortable with that, find joy even in that, and also think that it is a redeemable quality. And that's what frightens me, to a certain degree, which is why I tell people this is why being passive, we can't. It's not about converting racists into anti-racists. That's not going to happen. It's not converting racists into abolitionists. It's about giving those who already believe in anti-racism and abolition and who want to do the work bigger bullhorns, and for us to all be more vocal about it, because they're very aggressive. The right is very aggressive about what they want, what they believe, and don't care if they rub other individuals the wrong way with their beliefs. And I think it's going to be up to us, if we're going to win this fight, because it's a fight, to do the same and be very diligent and aggressive in our approach to how we embark on a new way of living in this world, for sure.
Yeah, right. We need to speak up. We need to organize. We need to vote.
Yes. Woo! Yeah. All those things. And we're all going to be doing different things in different ways. And so, I think Judy said something really important, and I'm glad that she did, because sometimes it's like we get caught up in wanting to do everything, and it's like, they're looking at Elijah's, they're reopening Elijah's case because over 2 million people signed a petition. You know what I'm saying? Like that. If would that have happened if it was 1.9? Who knows? And I think that there's a strength in numbers, and if that means you're just making meals for protesters, if that just means you're emailing your city council person every day, if you're sharing that information for other people to do the same, like we're not in a space to frown upon those individuals who are showing up in the ways that they can based on where they are, but it's about showing up first and foremost.
Well said. Showing up however you can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I always like to ask if there are any specific nonprofits or charities that you'd like to give a shout out to.
Oh yeah, for sure. Trans Women of Color Collective in New York City, Black Future Lab. Um, I also too just want to shout out the educators. So like when we look at the Ebony Janices of the world, Erica Buddington, Rachel Cargill for sure, Brittany Packnett, Jamira Burley, Black women who are really doing the work, who are leading the work, Bernice King, April Rain, who are covering ground in the activist space, in the entertainment space, folks who are showing up for the community. I think it's really important for us to continue to support their work and their efforts. We're also making space and room for the Raquel Willises of the world and others in the Black trans community who are being very vocal in this moment in time.
Yes, thank you for that. And where can people find you across social media? And is there anything we should specifically keep an eye out for?
You can find me at JOELAKAM as in Mary, AG, Joel, aka MAG. There's some book stuff that I'm working on. There's some the one-man show that I'm finishing up and trying to get on stage, whatever stage looks like at this point. I'm not really sure. Arthur and I coming back whenever time and space allows and facilitates that. We definitely do plan on continuing to do our show. Shout out to Arthur because I love him and I miss him. And yeah, there's a lot of work that I'm doing. So I'm just trying to be as vocal as possible about the art and about the space I'm in, the platform that I've been so fortunate enough to be gifted and have at this time.
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Thank you everyone who's tuned in and commented. Judy, Gigi, y'all are awesome. And shout out to my Showtreons. That's the bwaySHO Patreon that Judy is a part of. It's been really cool having people show the support and have helped me get this bwaySHO banner, which is pretty cool.
That's dope. That's dope. Shout out to y'all. Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah, Judy, join that town hall. Do that. That's important.
Yeah. And if y'all want to join the fun, this is a great time because we're having a Hamilton viewing party on Friday. So you can find that patreon.com/bwaySHO, bwaySHO. And just feel free to subscribe to this channel. I know Joel also has a channel that you can subscribe to. That really helps. I think people are always like, subscribe to my channel, but it is actually the thing that like, please do.
yeah, definitely subscribe to your channel. I really don't be doing shit on YouTube at all besides like I just use it as a hub for the video stuff, which you notice. But like, yeah, people go subscribe to your channel. So yes.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Peace.